Hi there, and welcome to my personal list of what I believe to be the top 5 bosses in Dark Souls 2. Now, I've not really shown a lot of love for Dark Souls 2 in this channel, but I recently played through the DLC for this game, which definitely inspired me to make this video. So, let's kick this off. At number 5 is the Pursuer. The Pursuer, I feel like, is the make you or break you type of boss. I actually think he's very tough for where you first find him in the game. I mean, compare him to the slow and easy to dodge first boss, the Last Giant, and he's a fair step up in difficulty. For new players, I think people could struggle and maybe wonder how on earth they'll cope with the later bosses in the game, if they can't even beat Pursuer. Which is actually kind of funny, because almost every other boss in the vanilla Dark Souls 2 is nowhere near as tough. That's why I think Pursuer is the make you or break you boss. I figure if you can make it past Pursuer, then you're in good stead for the rest of what the game is going to throw at you. Plus, more good news about this boss is you don't have to fight him this early on, and you can go ahead and fight Dragon Rider and Dragon Slayer, they're far easier bosses, and you can come back to Pursuer with a few extra levels and take him on then. I guess for me, I like to fight him straight after the Last Giant because it feels like a good challenge, and for the souls he gives you, it's worthwhile as you'll gain a healthy amount of levels for your victory. Having a general low level of adaptability at this stage is a real shame though, because we all need those iframes. And obviously I have to mention the so-called cheese method. I say cheese, but it still requires some precise timing and fast movement. If you can reach those turret things, then it's GG for the Pursuer. At number 4, it's Burnt Ivory King. Alright, so spoilers, the Pursuer was the only boss from the base game that made this list. The rest are all DLC bosses, as most people are aware that Dark Souls 2 doesn't really shine until you get to the DLC. I like the whole concept of this boss. When you first encounter the Ivory King on a blind playthrough, you'll most likely step in with only one Loist Knight and wonder what on earth is going on when his minions are ganking on you for what feels like an eternity. I mean, I suppose you can fight him this way, but when I tried to, my equipment ended up breaking due to how long it was taking. By the time the Ivory King turned up, I was fat rolling everywhere, and it wasn't going to end well for me. Obviously, if you want a much easier time, you'll want to go ahead and explore the rest of the level to unlock more Loist Knights to help you out. I love the subtle clue the game gave you by showing 3 abandoned chairs outside the boss room. It made me think, I bet I have to find more help. And so it encouraged you to go off and explore the deepest corners of the DLC. I just enjoyed the aspect of this boss fight. The motivation to keep the knights alive for as long as possible. It was like having free summons in your fight without actually having to summon NPCs. So it's just a really interesting boss fight which keeps you on your toes. Plus, I don't think there's been any other boss in Dark Souls that's had quite such an epic entrance before. Really quite spectacular. At number 3, Blue Smelter Demon. So, Dark Souls can get a notorious amount of hate for regurgitating previous bosses, but I think when it's done right, it can actually be fantastic. Dark Souls 3 did it right with Gunder, becoming Champion Gunder, and ultimately gaining more moves and being faster. Blue Smelter is in a similar fashion to that, in which he can do massive damage to you and has a tricky moveset to dodge. He's a decent step up from the regular Smelter Demon. It's a boss that truly rewards your patience and learning his moveset. Don't get greedy, watch carefully and attack when you can. It's just basic textbook for a good boss. Not to mention it's great practice for when you fight the regular Smelter Demon, which I always used to struggle with quite badly, but now I can really see the difference in how I've improved, which is nice. Number 2, Fume Knight. And Fume Knight is at number 2 simply because he just represents what I enjoy about the Soul series so much. I always like the humanoid enemies, which it gives you a kind of man-to-man type fight. You don't feel dwarfed by some high-flying dragon or some disgusting massive monstrosity. It's just you with a weapon facing your opponent who also has a weapon. And it's fight on until one of you dies. Fume Knight is just a cool boss. He's got one fast sword and one big sword, which lends itself to a really interesting moveset. The more time you spend with him, you'll understand when and how to dodge successfully. The second half of the fight is great too, as things change up a little bit. He buffs his sword and gains different moves. He's fairly slow at this stage, so you can use that to your advantage and take your time to finish him off nice and cleanly. Number 1 has to be Sir Alone. It just has to be. He may just be my favourite boss across the whole series, and I'll explain why. Like I said previously, I enjoy the man-to-man boss fights, and Sir Alone obviously ticks that box. What makes him particularly enjoyable for me, however, is how fast he is. Dark Souls 2 is quite a slow-paced game. It has slow healing, the rolling feels slow. Compared to Souls 3 and Bloodborne, it's a massive drop in speed. Sir Alone is an incredibly fast-moving boss. And this can be what is so surprising and shocking about him. He's so fast that I found myself having to roll a few fractions earlier than what felt natural, so there definitely felt like there was a learning curve to him. Once you start dodging him cleanly, you start progressing through the fight relatively unscathed, and then the battle truly begins. He's that fast that healing never really feels like much of an option, because you know once you start chugging that Estus flask, he's going to dart in and punish you for it. It's like he hates healers and wants to see them die. The other massive reason I think Sir Alone is number 1 is the fact that developers did something with this boss that, for some ungodly reason, they never repeated. They rewarded a flawless victory. Every other boss, it doesn't matter whether you pop every blood vial or knock back every Estus, a victory is a victory, no matter how you did it. But for this boss, the game actually recognises that you didn't take any damage and gives you the animation of Sir Alone committing seppuku. That's amazing! I love that! Why they never did this again, I just don't know. It's like the game gives you a pat on the back. It encourages you to accept the challenge of not getting hit. I wish they'd done this more. This is why Sir Alone is number 1. And that's it. Those were my top 5 bosses in Dark Souls 2. I hope you enjoyed my video, and tell me if you agree or disagree with anything I've said. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.